Okay, so just saw some of the biases already. So these are the most prominent one. There is like even longer list of the one, but these are the most commonly occurring one, right? The first one is the selection bias, which is things like which is not representative of I mean that could be the most obvious selection bias error, right? You are studying a particular group or collecting data, you are looking at the data from a particular group and making some conclusions about it, and they are not representative of the population that you should be studying or you are trying to study. Okay, so that is, say for example, if you go to the airport, stand at the entrance of the airport and then ask questions about certain things, related to their spending habits or their lifestyle and so on, you are likely to get responses that would be reflective of a population in a certain socioeconomic group, right. So it would be a wrong sample for a survey that you want to find out about the lifestyle of people. Okay. Now you can call this as a lifestyle of people who are at a certain economic group who can afford to fly. Okay. So that is okay, right, but it cannot be a representation of the general population. Okay. Even if you make a very specific segment by saying that these are all educated people, or these are all only males, or these are all people coming from a particular geographical region, right, or these are all people with nothing to do with the economic background at all, right, whatever other group that they may be, it still would be selected which is non-representative sample because the economic factor precludes it, right, because they come from a specific economic background, right. There is also self-selection bias, right. So say if I announce a lecture on a Saturday or a Sunday and then say that no, people who are interested can come, if you are not interested you do not come, and then these people come, these people self-select and therefore are already interested in it, and whatever information that I collect from this bunch of people may not be a true reflection of what the course is about or how interested people are about this course, right, because these people are self-selected themselves to be here, right. So therefore they do not represent the true sample of the population of the people who are taking the course together, right. So there is a lot of self-selection bias that happens because we are part of the group and people have self-selected to be there. The people who are very vocal about any issue, okay, we cannot base any decision on we cannot base any judgment based on what they see because they have self-selected themselves to be the vocal, okay. So they may be expressing a very tiny fraction of the overall population because they are vocal, right, and therefore it might bias the conclusions that you might have. Okay. Publication bias is the other one. Whatever you find as being very inciting, exciting or surprising news is always has a publication bias, right. Positive findings or more interesting findings are likely to be published than negative findings, right. So for example, if somebody studied a cancer, somebody did a study on whether video games causes colon cancer, okay, most likely that they will find out that it does not, right. There is no reason why playing video games will cause you colon cancer, right, and this study will never get published at all, right, and therefore something that's not cancer is not interesting. Okay. If something causes cancer is interesting, right. If they find out that there is, so there is a lot of studies that are conducted, a lot of data that actually is you can draw things which will not be published at all, but we cannot rule them out completely also, right, unless we know for sure. So then the recall bias, if you rely on any data that if you work on any data that relies on memory, then it is bound to have this recall bias. Okay. In one famous study in 1993, they had a longitudinal study of cancer, breast cancer among some group of college going women in Harvard. Okay. So what they did was they tracked these women and then took periodic surveys with them about certain questions. They repeated the same question every 5 years over a period of 40 years. So initially whatever they said about some questions actually tended to change over time, right. So to the extent that at some point of time in the future that they were blaming themselves for the cancer. Okay, so 40-year-old, 45-year-old, 50-year-old woman said that when I was in college, I had a really fun time. I was wild. I did drugs and this. Drank a lot, smoked a lot, and things like that, right? And this has got nothing to do with the breast cancer at all, right? They somehow seem to think that it might have contributed to the and that was not how they felt about when they were 25, okay, and that is or 30 or 35, okay. So people have to have the longer it gets away from the event, then they also have very fuzzy memories about it, and they make up things, okay. So you have to be very conscious about how far away from a particular event that you are asking people to respond to. Survivorship bias, we saw a lot of examples. Mutual funds is a good example. A company will only advertise the best rates, right? The ones. So they also do a lot of this mutual fund things that actually do not do well at all. They do really badly, and they don't get featured in their advertisements. We have this mutual fund that has always returned 12%, 13%, annually, and this is what it is. And for every success story, they might have double the amount of failures, right? But that never gets featured in their advertisements and promotional material. And then there is a very interesting thing called the healthy user bias. A good example is that people who take vitamins regularly are more healthy than those who are not. Okay, so suppose you introduce a tablet, which is supposed to be a health vitamin supplement or something like that, and the pharmacy conducts some trials with it, right? And then they find out that after taking the tablets, the patients or the participants of the study are very healthy. Okay, the ones that took our tablets are very healthy. Now, what is the bias here? Yeah. So it is not about the tablet at all. The kind of people who regularly take tablets are the kind of people who are also conscientious about many things, such as health and eating regularly, exercising, and things like that. Okay, somebody who is not even taking the tablet regularly, right? For example, I'm a participant in the study, and then I receive a bunch of tablets that I'm supposed to take once every day, but I am very sloppy, lazy. I wake up at different times of the day, I forget things, I don't eat regularly, so I forget to take the medicine also, then I'm not also healthy, right? So this will never get featured, right? Because the kind of people who take the tablets regularly, religiously, are the kind of people who are also good at many things, right? In doing things that you are supposed to do regularly, right? So it is a function of their nature and habit rather than the tablet that they are taking. Okay, so to prove this, there is a very nice parable of the purple pajamas. In this hypothetical study, the experiment, the researcher collected a bunch of young expecting couples, right? Who are going to receive, who are going to have their first baby at a hospital, right? A bunch of them, and then told them that you put your kid in a purple pajama, okay, when the kid sleeps in the night, and then he will grow out to be very smart and intelligent and successful in life, okay. And then it can turn out that these kids whose parents put them in purple pajamas are actually smart and intelligent and successful in life, 15, 20 years down the line, or 20, 25 years down. So what could be the problem here? Correct, right? So somebody has, if you are a kind of the parent who follows what is good for your kid, as told by a researcher, that do this regularly and your kid will be smart, and you do it religiously, that they are also doing a lot of things well about their kid in bringing up their kid, feeding them well, reading them books at night, okay, putting them in good schools, teaching them good values, talking to them about the value of hard work, etc., 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 right? And therefore, that is reflective of that, right? And there is a very fantastic, story that I read in one article about. So these Van Halen concerts are known for their technical wizardry, right? And they have this light and show and very interesting maybe fireworks and stuff like that, right? And it requires elaborate setup and a lot of choreography. There is a huge ground team that works in this concert, live concerts, and the Van Halen control everything, meaning that they have a very, very detailed contract with the organizers, right? With the host, whoever is. Suppose I invite Van Halen to perform in IIT Bombay, then I have to sign this contract, which is like 200 pages, which gives every detail about every single thing that needs to be there, even for them to come here and perform, right? And only if I can fulfill this contract with all the specifications of how the stage should be set up or all the paraphernalia should be, they will not come, okay? And somewhere buried deep in their contract is this one clause which says that at the backstage there should be a bowl of M&Ms and with no brown M&Ms, okay? So, and then basically, so apparently what they do is that, so when 1 or 2 days prior to the start with the concert day, they will come and check the setup and all, just make sure that has the host followed whatever we asked for, everything is working, they might do some trials and all that, right? So first thing they do is go backstage and then check for the bowl of M&Ms and see if there is a brown M&M in there, okay? And if it is not there, and then they conclude that everything is okay, okay? So it's a kind of their dip test, okay? So if somebody has gone through the contract line by line, found this one line which had this very peculiar clause and still managed to fulfill that clause, and this guy is a really conscientious guy, right? He's gone through everything, he's made sure that everything is there to the last detail, even though it appears to be really trivial, anal, maybe even arrogant to do something like that, right? People who do not know this backstory think that, these guys are so arrogant, they think that, they're so special that, they even insist that, they don't like M&Ms which are brown in color, and then they want a bowl of M&Ms without the brown color, right? And that's where, that's one part of the story that, gets reported in the press, and, when you want to kind of diss this group. But then that's so the objective behind this whole exercise is that, they just want to check, right? See, it's impossible to go through these 300 conditions, right? And then make sure that everything is okay. So they have this one test, which is that, if this guy can do this, probably most likely that he's done everything else also fine, okay? So, okay, so there is this interesting chart, which is, so you have this genre on the items, and columns are the how they died, okay? Why are rap and hip hop artists overwhelmingly dying due to homicide? So these are the major causes of their death: accidental suicide, homicide, heart related, and cancer, okay? The ones that are highlighted are either the extremes, okay? The red is the highest, the greens are the lowest, and the blues are, interesting numbers, I think, above average. About 50% is very high, right? So high that it is, it's not a reflection of what happens in the general population, right? Half of them get either killed or die in die because of suicide, right? I think could be even like, drug overdose and stuff like that, right? And it is easy to attribute it to the race, okay? They're predominantly black, and also to the fact that, it came out of the culture of violence, right? Prison and, the hoods and so on, right? There is a lot of reference to drugs and, guns and so on in their songs as well, and it seems like a reasonable conclusion to make. But what do you think about the other things? See, why are jazz musicians dying more of cancer? Very high, 30%. And then there is this folk guys are also 32%. Punk and metal, accidents, more accidents. So the last four, you see punk, metal, rap and hop. So they kind of dominate this first three, which is accidental suicide and homicide, which are all unnatural deaths, right? And heart related and cancer seem to be the more natural deaths. And they're not dying so much. And then look at their numbers, they are also lowest in the natural deaths, okay? That tells you something, okay? Rap and hip hop artists don't die so often of heart attack or cancer. There is a very interesting insight here. There is a bias in the sample here, right? This is young, right? So it's only when you get to like a 50 or a 55, then causes such as heart attack or a cancer actually comes into the equation, right? In fact, a lot of them are actually, half of them are dying even before they get to that stage. And there are very people. There are people who have died of cancer and heart disease also, but very few, simply because they have not reached the age where these diseases are more common in an age group. Okay, so it is how the genre of the music affects the expectancy of famous musicians, right? Beware of selection, because the course, of course, most rap musicians aren't dead yet. Okay, so that is the insight here, right? They are not dead yet, and therefore, whoever is dead died because of some kind of an unnatural death, right? The problem will be more extreme the younger the genre is. Another selection effect may be that getting killed or dying in an unusually contributes to your fame, which seems to be the case with most celebrities. Remember that at least half of the rappers and hip hop who ever lived are still alive. They are too young to die of a old age related disease such as cancer and heart attack. Okay. Okay. So, so when we look at looking at data, right, for analysis, there are 4 things that you need to ask about the data itself. Okay, I think it talks to some about like where is the data coming from, how good it is data, is it reliable, etc. Right? Where is the data coming from? Okay, who ran the survey, who paid for it, do they have an ulterior motive for having the result to go one way, right? So it is. So when you look at numbers, and don't get excited by them just because they are like in the form of numbers, and you can run some numbers with it, you can do some analysis with it, right? You have to be very cautious about where is this data coming from, right? Most usually the government data is reliable, right? Because they will very clearly state why this data was collected, for what purposes, and so on. Okay, and we have to at least assume that at some level. A lot of analysis that the government does can be very biased. Okay, so they take the same census data and then they will kind of spin it in a way that that supports their policies, or or some of the outcomes of their efforts into saying that no, because we did this thing happened and all. Okay, don't rely so much on the analysis that they do, but if there is a raw data that is available, that is produced by the government, it is usually reliable, because for a government to fudge that data is very hard. Okay, because there are so many people involved in that effort, and to coordinate that is simply impossible. Okay, so and many of the government agencies are also very independent in the way that they do things, right? So where they cannot fudge things is where they fudge is actually spinning the data into favorable narratives. Okay, so you have to be very cautious about government narratives, but you can rely on the data that is available to you, right?
They might not even collect the data, like with COVID.
Correct. I mean, data is there, but I mean, very enterprising journalists have gone and collected the data, which are still available with the government, but then they made these connections and then produced very insightful insights about what was happening with COVID, right? So again, they are all working with government data only. It's not like so they went to the hospital, counted some registers, they went to the birth and death registry, and then found out some discrepancy with what the government was reporting as dead versus what is recorded as being death, right? So now government cannot control every single agency, right? Now don't count this, don't record them at all, okay, in the registry. You cannot do that, right? Because people want a record, right? So if somebody dies in your family, you have to go there and get a certificate, right? And for that, the agency should record the recorded death. Okay, and for recording the death, there are a few fields that they have to fill up, right? How this person die, because of health reasons, accident, or whatever, right? Because it should be reflected in the record. Okay, most of the data that is produced by universities are a good place of reliable data, right? So that is also, so if you find some data set that is being part of some study conducted at some university, and it is being peer reviewed also, right? I think we are going second one, right, which is being peer reviewed, meaning that it is a conference or a journal where you submit your paper and then also submit the supporting data as evidence of what you claim in the paper, and there are people who review this thing. Okay, they also look at the original data source, and then they will also point out, right, and they will not let this publication, or they will not accept this publication if there are some problems with the data, right. So if it is peer reviewed, then that means somebody has looked at it and then they have accepted it, right, and they have given it at least one level of approval. How was the data collected? What questions were asked? Who asked them? How did they ask them? Who was asked, right? So you know that you can actually construct a questionnaire that can actually produce the results that you want. Okay, I think you guys must have learnt it in your qualitative course. I think like there's something called a leading question, right? So for example, I know I can ask, my lectures are very interesting, isn't it? Okay, and then you say yes. I mean, I'm kind of suggesting what I'm expecting you to say, right? And you can actually lead a lot of these kind of things. I mean, you can construct the question in such a way that it produces the desired results, right? So always insist on what is the survey, the sample question survey that was used in this. Okay. Yeah. Agree to strongly agree, right? That is the response, right? So if you find out that that was the scale that was being used, right? That they cannot even disagree with it in the first place, right? Or be neutral about it, right? So then there is fundamentally flawed way of it. And someone can produce a questionnaire like that and then have a result and then supply that data to you and say that, or claim that everybody agrees with their point of view or agrees with the product or the service or whatever it is, right? Is the data taken out of context, right? So that's cherry picking of data, right? Which is that you only pick the data from a large data set that supports your narrative, right? So that will also tell you. So people, whoever do that analysis, should also present you with the entire data set, right? So that you can verify for yourself whether only convenient data has been chosen for the purpose of analysis and inconvenient data has been left out. Okay. So cherry picking is not allowed. So is it like is the numbers being taken out of context to support a foregone conclusion? So these are some of the basic things you can look at. Your source of data and things like whether it has been peer reviewed, how was it collected. So you should be able to check any kind of survey. You have to be able to see what the actual questionnaire looked like. Okay. Sometimes even things like how the questionnaire was even administered will matter, right? Whether it was an online survey, whether it's an offline survey, was there somebody with a clipboard asking these questions to you verbally while you responded and I was recording, or was it an anonymous survey or a survey where you have to give your name, phone number, everything, your Aadhaar number, your residential address, and then the kind of responses that you will do are very different. See, if I run a evaluation, like a course evaluation with and without this